Welcome back. Nangarhar in Achin district of Afghanistan has a crater 300 meters wide. That's where the mother of all bombs struck. Packing 8,100 kilos of explosives, this bomb went off 6 feet above the ground, vaporizing everything in the vicinity, but leaving no lasting radiation effect because it is non-nuclear. Here's all you need to know about the MOAB.
This is the MOAB, the Massive Ordnance Air Blast Explosive, the world's largest non-nuclear weapon. The GBU-43B, first developed as a psychological weapon to scare enemy troops during the 2003 Iraq War, was developed for $341 million and used for the first time in combat in Afghanistan. With the size and weight, deployment is a huge challenge even for the world's largest bombing aircraft. The bomb has grid fins that fold into the body during carriage. It can only be deployed out of the back of a large cargo plane. The bomb rides on a pellet. A parachute pulls the pellet and bomb out of the plane. The pellet then separates so that the bomb can fall to its target. The bomb's grid fins extend to help control the bomb's descent. It accelerates rapidly to its terminal velocity and is partially guided to its target via satellite. It explodes 6 feet above the ground. This airburst mechanism amplifies destructive range. A specialized MC-130 Hercules cargo aircraft released the weapon at 7 p.m. local time on Thursday. Bureau Report, WION.
And joining us with more on this, Kapil Kak, retired Air Vice Marshal with me in the studio. Good evening, sir. Sun Rasmussen, Guardian reporter, joining us from Kabul. Hans M. Christensen, director of the Nuclear Information Project, Federation of American Scientists, with us from Washington. We'll also be joined by retired Brigadier Ghazanfar Ali Shah, who's a defense expert and is in Pakistan. Hello to all of you. Sunni Rasmussen, let me come to you first. What kind of an impact is being seen in Afghanistan after this MOAB struck almost 24 hours back, if I'm not wrong?
It's actually still a little bit early to say because damage has not been assessed, and even the U.S. military say now that it's too early to conclude anything in terms of casualties, even though the Afghan Ministry of Defense quickly said that over 30 ISIS militants have been killed. But I think it's worth waiting until they assess the damage in the days to come. Also partly because the strike was followed up by clearing operations, and even today at 9 a.m. there were still fighter jets in the area strafing the same area that was attacked yesterday. But that being said, it's definitely rattled the local population. I've spoken to civilians in villages around this targeted area, and people 1.5 miles, 2 miles away talk about how their windows were blown out, how their walls have cracked, how their cattle has been killed. So people have certainly felt it, and even for a country where they have felt explosions and heard explosions for the better part of 3 decades, this was a particularly powerful blast, obviously.
Hans, I want to ask you more about this bomb, which is being called the mother of all bombs. Was it the best suited for an operation like this, and why?
Well, it was developed to be able to destroy, with its blast, large areas, much more so, obviously, than normal-sized conventional bombs can do, but also to have some capacity to rattle underground structures. Now, it's important to emphasize that this is not an earth penetrator. The U.S. does have an earth penetrator that's actually heavier that would have been used if we were talking about much deeper facilities. But even because of its blast, this thing was capable of apparently shaking the underground structures.
So we've run a graphic report comparing it to the Hiroshima atom bomb, and but there is a fundamental difference. This is a non-nuclear device. Just help our viewers understand how the impact differs.
No, that's correct. This is the blast effect from this weapon is nothing compared to even the smallest nuclear weapon that's in the U.S. arsenal. The very, very smallest setting that we think that U.S. bombs, nuclear bombs, have would still be nearly 30 times as powerful as this one. This is the very, very smallest one in comparison to the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima back in 1945, which was considered by today's standard to be a small nuclear weapon. That is more than 1,000 times more powerful than this. So there is no comparison with nuclear weapons. And also from this attack, you only get the blast effect. There's no residual effects in terms of radiation that would linger in the area for a long time if they used nuclear weapons. So this is a completely different type of weapon.
And it's often said that the Taliban operate through these tunnels, underground tunnels, and we are still waiting to assess the full impact of this bomb. But Hans, do you believe that it might have achieved the target of going after these safe havens for militants?
It's hard to say. I mean, I remember when they started the war in Afghanistan that they were going after people hiding in tunnels and caves and what have you. And this is still the first time that this weapon has been used. So it's really hard to assess whether it was necessary or why it was necessary compared to whatever else they've been doing. I mean, they've been pounding that area or, operations in Afghanistan with conventional weapons for many years, and even though they've been hiding out in tunnels, this is the first time we have seen this weapons used. So it's a little unclear why this was decided now.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
No, the points have been very well made. I think operations of the Afghan National Security Forces and the US advisors in this region have been seriously hampered by the ISIS fighters undertaking operations and then seeking safety and security in these tunnels. Only 2 days ago, a US serviceman died in there. So I think this has been going on for some time. We mustn't forget that.
But why use a bomb of this magnitude now?
The question is that if the security is being sought underground, there are two options. One is, as has been rightly pointed out, you can use a deep earth penetrator bomb, which is available with the US Armory. The second is this bomb which has been specifically developed in the post-2001 Afghan war, where these kind of tunnels, bunkers and caves were being sought as refuge for fighters to do quick raids and run back. So the conventional forces against them were hugely hamstrung. And I think in that sense, I agree with what's been said, that it's too early to evaluate. I'm sure by now the battle damage assessment would have been made by the Americans, but to let it filter out to the rest of the world, it might take a while. But I have no doubt that this would have achieved substantial damage in terms of breaking up the tunnels so that that security is no more available to the ISIS fighters. That is the key point, and why this specific stage of the operations, because we mustn't forget that Nangarhar and Kunar are the two provinces. Achin, you talked about where this has happened. There have been huge number of very active ISIS fighters threatening American and Afghan interests.
Right.
So especially at a time when this is the campaign season, the Afghan National Security Forces and the Americans are under huge pressure of not just ISIS but also Taliban, who incidentally are at each other's throats, so to speak.
Right. Brigadier Ghazanfar Ali Shah, I want to ask you, we are looking at the political reactions as well that have come in on this. The first one to criticize the strike was former Afghan President Hamid Karzai. The timing of the strike is being questioned. Do you believe that America, after having exited a war that lasted for more than a decade, has once again gone back in Afghanistan and opened the Pandora's box? Brigadier Shah, do you find the timing of the strike questionable? Was this the wisest move for America to make? Right, we'll try and reconnect with him. But of course, more than 15 years after the U.S. invaded Afghanistan to topple the Taliban, the security situation we know in that country still remains volatile. The MOAB strike may have only reopened some of those old wounds. Archit Sheshadri filed this report earlier today. Take a look.
American troops bombed eastern Afghanistan Thursday to stop ISIS militants. An MC-130 aircraft dropped the mother of all bombs in the Achin district of the Nangarhar province. It's close to Pakistan's border. The bombs hit a series of caves used by ISIS terrorists. The first to confirm was White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. The White House says it targeted the system of tunnels that ISIS fighters used to move around freely.
At around 7 p.m. local time in Afghanistan last night, the United States military used a GBU-43 weapon in Afghanistan. The GBU-43 is a large, powerful, and accurately delivered weapon. We targeted a system of tunnels and caves that ISIS fighters used to move around freely, making it easier for them to target U.S. military advisors and Afghan forces in the area.
In the past year, more than 200 U.S. airstrikes have been conducted in Nangarhar. It is the stronghold of the ISIS group, which established a foothold 5 years ago. U.S. President Donald Trump described the bombing as a very successful mission.
We're very, very proud of our military. Just like we're proud of the folks in this room, we are so proud of our military, and it was another successful event.
But former Afghan President Hamid Karzai said his country was being used as a testing ground for American bombs. The unilateral American move has set the cat among the pigeons. Russia claims to have a bomb 4 times stronger, the father of all bombs. A senior think tank advisor says the attack could also send a loud and clear message to Syria and North Korea about U.S.'s foreign policy. So far, Donald Trump has not clarified a strategy for Afghanistan where more than 8,000 U.S. troops still remain. The Afghan Taliban, which wants to overthrow the U.S.-backed government in Kabul, are opposed to ISIS because both groups have clashed over land rights. Now, the world waits and watches to find out what will be the U.S.'s next move. Reporting, Archit Sheshadri, WION.
Sunil Rasmussen, my question to you is, while the world is looking at what next from America, how's Afghanistan, the government of Afghanistan, responded to the strike?
Well, the government has come out and praised the U.S. for the strike. They've also claimed that they were fully informed about the strike before it was carried out, which is something that's not always the case, especially in Nangarhar, where we've seen American drone strikes target villages where there's been civilian casualties. So they have been fully supportive, and they've said that this is the right way of targeting ISIS militants. Then there are, of course, people like Hamid Karzai. There's also Umar Zaghilwal, who is the Afghan envoy to Pakistan, has always also been critical of the strike. And in general, I think analysts and pundits in the country have not been not embraced the strike to the same extent as the government has.
Right, Sunil Rasmussen, thanks very much. I'm told that we have Brigadier Ghazanfar Ali Shah back with us, and I'll come to him just a bit. I want to play out some graphics for you first. Last September, surgical strikes by India on terrorist camps across the line of control in Kashmir did suggest that Delhi could respond to persistent or frequent terror attacks. but such strikes require planning and forethought. Surgical strikes against terrorists are no child's play. Of course, it demands precise location of terror camps. These are best acquired through good ground intelligence and satellite imaging. It requires strike forces to have the best information, equipment and training. It also demands that the brass here have done their homework on Pakistan's nuclear capabilities and the willingness to use them against India. And so we come to this question, Air Vice Marshal Kak, when we look at what America goes and does frequently, Syria, Afghanistan, wherever the interests are threatened, the American forces go and do the needful. Of course, we know that India is not America, but India has the capability and the precision. Is this conceivable in the India-Pakistan context?
Well, in terms of capabilities, the Indian armed forces have more than adequate capability to meet the challenge that they confront. As an instant, it might interest you that I dropped a 4,000-pound bomb 40 years ago, developed in India, 40 years ago. And it was not dropped like this particular bomb through rolling out from a transport aircraft. It was dropped from a bomber in Director. I dropped it. So capabilities, I don't see we have a problem. The question is, we need to understand the escalation dynamics of India-Pakistan war. We need to understand what are the values at stake for both countries. Unfortunately, Pakistan and India are in what's called a stability-instability paradox. There is stability at the nuclear level, but conventional level too, stability. But below that, at the lower foothills of what you could call a peak of deterrence, we see Pakistan having all the advantages. So someday, the threshold of tolerance of India, as happened at Uri, will get breached. Then the choices before us is what exactly do we do? Now, this is where there has to be a set of escalatory steps on that escalatory ladder which meet two things. One is the specifics of targeting the terrorists who are launching operations against us. And secondly, more importantly, there is also a domestic opinion. There is a massive upsurge in psychological terms amongst people of India as to how can India continue to take this bashing from Pakistan and not react.
Right.
Now, these are the factors there. But as I said, wiser counsel must prevail. I give you the instance of Pathankot. It was a nerve center of our defense capability in terms of what you can achieve as an air base. Air base has strike assets which will be launched against adversary countries. Now, if Pakistan chooses to do a terror attack on an air base, it hasn't been done till now, then you're in a different ball game altogether.
Right.
Yet we saw Prime Minister Modi and his political leadership exercise restraint. Recall the words of Mr. Nasser Janjua, the National Security Advisor of Pakistan, actually speaking to the National Security Advisor of India, that rest assured, I will sort out Jaish-e-Mohammed. Quote unquote, these are his words, quoted by one of your senior.
Let me get in the Pakistani guest here. Brigadier Shah, India has, as Air Vice Marshal Kak has said, on more than one occasion proved that it has the precision, it has the capability to carry out an attack like this. India has also, in great depth, mapped out where terror training camps operate in Pakistan. Is this MOAB attack on Afghanistan, does it also give Pakistan a message that this could be coming the way of the Pakistani terror camps?
First of all, I would like to say that there are two things. One is the Indian army, the other is the Pakistan army. One is the Indian leadership, the Indian leadership, Pakistani leadership. And then on top of that, in both countries there are some common people living in both the countries who are common man. So we must speak truth to those people who will suffer because of the atrocities and because of the carelessness and because of the wrong projection of power projection. If you say the Indian army has the capability, I would like to say Pakistan army has the adequate capability, whether conventional or nuclear, to strike you back at the time of our own choosing. You have camps, terrorist training camps in Kashmir, all over I know. You have terrorist training camp in Rajasthan, I know, because I've been working in those organizations who have been tapping the terrorist training camp. You have given refuge to the terrorists like Bandar Bukti. You have given refuge to a terrorist like Tariq Fateh. So they escalate relations to the dangerous level between the two countries.
I think you're confusing critics with terrorists.
Listen to me now. Listen to me. Then your army and your political leadership spoke such a big lie that I have a...
Oh, well. We seem to have lost the link, but interesting always to hear. So,
very laughable comments. I mean, coming from a brigadier who's a senior officer who served very senior positions, I thought there will be some maturity and a certain element of professionalism exercised in the question that you asked. I mean, nations haven't gone to war despite 30 years of cross-border terrorism from Pakistan. But we need to evolve a new grammar to be able to...
You think the strike is going to force a rethink in the Indian defense establishment? We can do this. We know where they're operating from. What is stopping us?
It's not a
How
rethink.
long can Pakistan keep playing the nuclear card?
Palki, it would be reasonable to assure ourselves that every situation would have been war gamed. Every single situation. What kind of a terrorist attack, what mass scale casualties, where, what is the target, and what would be our reaction in military terms based on a political evaluation of what is at stake and whether the political leadership is willing to go all the way into a conventional war, even if it's a limited war like Kargil. Now, all this has to be calculated. I don't think this would give an opportunity for a rethink. Enough rethinking has been done. Sure. It's just that, for example, Uri was the lowest level of escalation. Okay, we do, although we called it a surgical strike, in my view, that was not a surgical strike. I'm a surgical strike man, classically associated with air power. In this case, it was a cross-border raid. Of course, very precisely targeted, and you said in your introductory remarks how much is required to take on a terror cap. How much in terms of coordination, control, use of satellite assets. Satellites were used in that. Use of unmanned aerial vehicles, and what kind of a capability do we marshal on the ground quickly, like in Hindi is called a kabaddi. You go across, touch the guy, destroy him and come back. That was a classical operation that was done. What would be done next time? That Uri counter-strike would have been a very, very good signal to the Pakistani army, especially when they have completely denied this has not happened, which is in a sense meant to assure their own people nothing like this happened. Yes. Although people of Pakistan...
all I can say is, as a civilian, it's very frustrating when one American soldier is killed by ISIS, they go and drop what they're calling the mother of all bombs. Whereas we see provocation after provocation, and I understand the...
Palki, but in all fairness, they haven't dropped the bomb because of that one. They have themselves said it.
Yeah.
But the reasons were there for them to drop. And the point you made earlier in your remarks, America is not coming back in a big way.
Yeah.
America is committed to come back selectively depending on the circumstances that prevail. They may. McMaster's visiting, you might have John Nicholson make a request to him that he do a little surge, because he's requested for another 6,000 to 7,000 personnel.
I have to wrap this, sir, but thanks very much.
Thank you, Palki. I'm sorry I took extra time.
Thanks very much. Always a pleasure to have you here on the show. And thank you for watching this edition of Gravitas. The news continues on WION.